交易者听起来很酷，没盈利又什么都不是。K 线之间，你屡败屡战，却屡战屡败，浑然不知是眼界输了。金钱永不眠，方向不止一边。电波刺穿圈层，声音勾画伦敦。这一刻，为你推开金融城的交易门。
1995年2月27号，伦敦股市暴跌，纽约道琼斯指数下降29个百分点。有着233年历史，在全球范围内掌控270多亿英镑资产的巴林银行，毁于一位年仅28岁的交易员尼克·里森之手。他被人们称为国际金融界的天才交易员，他是不可战胜的里森。他既是巴林银行新加坡分行期货与期权部门总经理，也是后勤部主管。他在新加坡和东京交易市场进行衍生性金融产品投机交易。1995年，日本大阪神户大地震，日本股市大跌，里森做出错误交易决策，亏损越积越多，最终导致了高达14亿美金的损失，里森锒铛入狱。有评论家认为，银行自我审核制度存在缺陷。新加坡的官方报告指出，银行管理的疏失是主要关键，但他说是自己弄垮了巴林银行的。从他任职1989年7月到1995年2月，不到6年时间，一家老牌银行被消失。尼克·里森是如何做到的？当年到底发生了什么？下面就有请 Richard 来连线这位魔鬼交易员，一探究竟。
Hello?
Richard, hi, it's Nick.
Hello, Nick. Can you just say hello to the Chinese audience?
Yeah, hi, it's a pleasure to talk to you all today.
And let's start with a quick ask and answers.
I've had times when I've been successful. Definitely guilty, because it's passing the time that is so difficult. I might like to think that I didn't go to Barings. Absolutely.
I have seen your interview online. Everyone calls you the role trader. As I know, you had several roles in Barings and you were good at back office work. Before that job, did you know anything about trading?
Obviously you do, because since the age of 18, I'd worked in the financial markets. So you have some knowledge, but do you have enough hands-on knowledge? No, pretty much self-taught throughout that period. Barings wasn't an organization that, because everything was happening so quickly at Barings, the part that I worked for was only formed in 1985. There was new people joining the organization. Everybody was trying to pass on their skills. So no, at the time, I definitely wasn't ready for it, but I worked closely with traders.
And what happened in Singapore? And how do you bring down Barings?
I was 25 years old at the time, to Singapore to run the futures and options operation. I didn't have the necessary management expertise. It was probably, for me at the time, it was too much too soon. I made some bad decisions. I concealed some losses. By September 92, there were some losses in the 5/8 account, the illegal account that I used to hide some of the positions. By May of 1993, the loss had got up as high as $20 million. I then made all of that back with the expiry of the options in May of 1993, and thought really that I could start my life again. But the guys who executed the orders on the trading floor, they made some mistakes. The following week, those mistakes went back into the 5/8 account. The story started again, and from that point, over a period of time, compounded those initial mistakes with even bigger mistakes. And thought that I could cope with the situation, that I was coping with the situation. But unfortunately, over the period of 3 years, that they just continued to get worse, and that resulted in some big consequences for me, because obviously I went to prison in Singapore, but even bigger consequences for the bank. Ultimately led to £862 million worth of losses and the collapse of Barings Bank.
You were only 25 at that time. Were you ready to take that responsibility?
No, I don't think so. When you look back with hindsight, I would say quite definitely I wasn't ready at that time. Up until the age of 25, I'd been very, very successful and never encountered anything that I couldn't cope with. This, for me, was just the next rung on the ladder. It wasn't going to be something that I could cope with, but unfortunately it was. I think 25 years of age, you think that you can cope with it. And unfortunately, my history tells me that I wasn't able to do that. If I'd worked within the confines of the proprietary trading that I was supposed to do, it would have been a different story. The problem is obviously that I traded outside of my limits. I took on far bigger positions than I was supposed to do and traded in some products that I wasn't supposed to trade in either.
The account name was 58. So what did it mean? So 8 is a lucky number in China because it means getting rich. If a license plate is 58, then it might be more expensive than the car itself. For you, is 8 a lucky number or a nightmare?
I don't know. I'm not very. I think one of the problems is that I'm not really that superstitious. It was just something that occurred on that day. That was the logic behind it. But then I read somewhere else, and I don't know if this is true or not, but if there are 5/8s, it's not so lucky. I'm not really superstitious. I'm not worried about the number 8 anymore, and I definitely don't consider it particularly lucky for me.
How did you feel when you first used the 5/8 account to cover up losses? And were you afraid of getting caught?
I was scared when I did it. And the reason I was scared was because, all you have to do to expose the discrepancy is do a position check. And it would have seen, we only had 2 accounts. We had a London account, we had a Tokyo account. All the customers were within those 2 accounts. So you only had to add numbers together and then compare it to the Singapore International Monetary Exchange. And there would have been a discrepancy every single day for 3 years that would have been the position in my illegal 5/8 account. But nobody did that reconciliation, not until 1995. I'd worked at Morgan Stanley for 2 years prior to Barings, and I would have been the person doing that.
What went wrong? Dealing for clients or acting as an agent?
It's a combination of both, to be honest with you. Obviously, there was the retail trading, the broking arm where we were executing for clients, but we also had proprietary desks in Tokyo. And they would be looking for us to hedge some of their positions, maybe do some rollovers. And in Singapore at the time, this was 1992, the Nikkei 225 futures contract at the time was trading 2,000 contracts a day. And very quickly, because Barings arrived, Morgan Stanley arrived, and circuit breakers were kicking in Japan. All of the business, there was no business or no futures that could trade in Osaka. All of the business shifted to Singapore. So the volume went from 2,000 to 25,000 overnight. And Singapore wasn't ready for that. So they didn't have enough people working on the trading floor. The systems weren't good enough. So when it came to matching trades, it should take 30 minutes. But it was taking 12 or 13 hours to match trades because the system would break down. People couldn't put their tickets in, so they weren't matching. And so sometimes it would be at 1 o'clock in the morning that you realized that your trades didn't match. And then you would have to make the customer good. And then there would be an error that you would have to trade your way out of or take a loss on. So it was a combination. The retail side, in terms of the errors and things going wrong, was a much smaller component of the overall loss. But there were errors from the guys who worked on the trading floor that would have contributed in small number to some of the final loss.
I see. As you said, things have been getting worse since September 1992. What was your strategy at that time? Just gambling?
If you look at it over 3 years that I was in Singapore, I'm not sure necessarily it's strategy, but if you think about, my own mental state throughout that period, at the beginning, when the positions were quite small, I would manage them and there would be a strategy how I was going to get out of this. Unfortunately, as the position got bigger, there was part of what I needed to do every month in order to survive and in order to continue. I needed to make sure that at the end of the month, the account balance, 5/8 account balance was 0. So the only way that I could do that with the products that were available to me was to sell options. Because at the end of the month, one of the accountants would look at the balance sheet and she would check that the account balance agreed to all of our customers. So if I had a loss in the 5/8 account, it wouldn't agree. So each month I needed to make sure on one day of the month, the last day of the month, I had to make sure that the balance in the 5/8 account was zero. So if I sold an option in Singapore at the time, they would pay me the premium immediately, all of it, 100% of the premium. So I would use the premium to bring the deficit in the 5/8 account balance back down to zero. Because of the need to make sure that people didn't expose what was going on, I was selling options, okay, which obviously over time with the market moving would increase my exposure. Obviously, when I sold them, there wasn't too much in it, but if the market moved a big way in one direction or the other, it almost became futures positions themselves. So it was increasing my exposure very dynamically as the market moved around. So strategy the strategy that overtook wasn't really a trading strategy. It was, how do I bring the account balance back down to zero?
Barings Bank was one of the oldest banks in the UK with clients including the royal family. When it went broke, people said that you were the one to blame. Do you agree?
Look, definitely me. If I hadn't taken the trades, the bank wouldn't have collapsed. It might have collapsed since because there were lots of things that were wrong at Barings. You know, the controls were, obviously my story highlights the fact that the controls were really, really poor, totally inadequate. And a lot of the people that were in those controlling roles weren't very good at their jobs. So at the time, 100% it was me that caused the collapse of the bank. But that's not to say that there weren't lots of endemic or systemic problems within Barings at that time, because there were. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. It is as simple as somebody adding two numbers together and comparing it to the Singapore International Monetary Exchange.
At the age of 25, you have already charged the floor traders team in Singapore. As you said, that's a little bit too early for you to take that position. If you won like 38, not 25, will these mistakes or will the disaster happen again?
I'd like to think that I would have had a bit more experience. I think one of the things stays with me from that time, and I talk around the world at lots of different conferences and stuff, and people are always looking for certain words of advice. And when I was 25, for me, working in a very male-dominated industry, everybody's fighting against each other to make that money, asking for help and advice was a sign of weakness. So at 25, I saw asking for help and advice as a sign of weakness, whereas really I was surrounded by people that could help me. And I wasn't a great communicator. I was quite introvert. I kept everything to myself and thought that I could cope. And I proved quite spectacularly that I couldn't cope. I'm a big believer in communicating and talking about issues that face you, whether they're work issues or whether they're personal issues, about what's happening to you, and where appropriate, ask for help and advice, as was a sign of trying to do things correctly. That's always the biggest thing for me. People should communicate better and ask for help, because you are surrounded by people that can help you.
Yeah, you are right. But would it have been different without the Kobe earthquake in 1995?
No, I don't. My own opinion, and it's a personal opinion, is that Kobe was just one of the triggers. It was probably the final one of the triggers, but it wasn't the reason why the bank collapsed. The reason why the bank collapsed is that by that stage, my position was way too big. It was unmanageable. Barings had no more money. There was no money that could come out to me to margin the positions or fund the positions any longer. The position was increasing dynamically as the market was falling. There was a lot of knockout puts that were coming into the market at times. Every time you breached a new level, as you went through 19,000, there was added impetus from the knockout puts. And my position was just getting bigger. And I'm sure you can do this, and maybe some of your listeners, but because I had straddles, every time I'm going through a new level, 18,000, 18.5, 17.5, the futures position is just getting more and more exposed.
When everything was exposed, you went to Germany and served 9 months in German prison. Do you mind if I ask, did you went to Germany to avoid going to jail?
The pure animal instinct, number one, comes from the time that I fled Singapore. You just want to survive. And everything was about prolonging or trying to buy yourself a bit of time. There might be an auditor coming in to look at the records. You do what is necessary just to survive the next period in the belief that you're going to be able to turn the situation around. So you're always looking for a very small positive that makes you believe that you're going to be able to solve the situation. It is just that. And when I left Singapore, it was just about surviving for a few days, trying to work out where I was going to go. It wasn't a case of running away and trying to hide for a few years. It was just trying to work out how I was going to be able to mount a defense. It's not to the extent that I was going to try to prove that I was innocent, because I knew that I wasn't. But obviously, I wanted to limit and work out exactly how long I was going to jail for, where I was going to go to jail, those sort of things, and try to make sure that my wife was safe. So that's more where it kicked in. You know, I suppose at that stage, my number was up, but, you know, it was important that I got my wife to a safe location as well.
After 4 years in prison, you were released. Do you still suffer from your prison experience? Does anyone question who you are because of what you have done?
My history always goes before me. I can never hide from what happened, and I don't try to hide. I think what I do now is I try to use my experiences as well as I can, because I've had to overcome a lot. So some people, you know, that they use that for their own purposes, that it can be quite motivational. I don't see it in that way. For me, it's just a story. It's a story that I'm embarrassed, but, you know, I have a second chance at life, and I'm going to take that. So, you know, I am the sum of everything, all of my experiences and everything that happened to me. And if I can use that in some way to move forward, I do that. It doesn't always please everybody, but that's okay. I don't need to please everybody. I talk extensively around the world. I've been to Hong Kong to talk on a few occasions, Australia. I'm off to New York in a few weeks to do some conferences there and talk to a couple of the big investment banks there, because it's all about, you know, this the way that banks are looking at everything that goes on within their trading floors and elsewhere. It's about behavior, it's about conduct, and my story is a warning story. You know, it's a warning sign for banks, it's a warning sign for people. You know, why put yourself under that pressure, that risk? You know, ask for help and look after yourself as much as you're looking after the organization that you work for. I didn't understand. I never expected to spend a day in prison. I spent 4.5 years in prison in Singapore, and I didn't understand the risk that I was putting myself under as much as the risk I was putting the bank under.
And since the bankruptcy of Barings, financial institutions, they has changed a lot. They pay more attention on the risk management and their financial regulations or their systems. On the other hand, you have also made a great contribution to the financial institutions. They have changed a lot because the collapse. Can we make a hypothesis? Had it not been for the collapse of Barings, the hidden financial crisis would have been even more explosive and maybe, destroy the global financial systems. What do you think of this?
I think it's a hypothesis that possibly stands up. But definitely the banks are in a far better place than they were back in 1995. Not all the banks were the same. I worked for Morgan Stanley, and they were very solid controls, very well structured. From an IT perspective, they were very, very good. It's funny, I was in Manchester at the weekend, and I had a couple of beers with somebody who works for Morgan Stanley now in Canary Wharf. He's an IT guru, and they're still using the same system that they used in 1995. It's called TAPS. Obviously, they've updated it, but from a business and from an organization perspective, it's important where you invest your money. So in 1995, it was all about trading, where can we make more money? How can we get a new trading desk? How can we get a little bit more edge? Morgan Stanley was the only company, or one of the few companies at the time, that invested a lot of money in technology. Barings didn't. It was all about being there first, getting as much of market share as they could, and then the infrastructure might follow later. Sometimes it didn't. But, a lot of banks now are investing or over the last 15 to 20 years, have invested a lot of time and money into risk management, into compliance, into technology. And I think that means that, the world is in a better place. 2008, the global financial crisis notwithstanding. So I think, banking today is in a far safer place than it was for the last, or ever, really. The risk managers are better, they're better educated, they're better qualified. So are the compliance officers. The technology is picking up. And I don't think you'll see a big rogue trading scandal again in the future, certainly not in any of the markets that are mature. You might see something in an Eastern European country or Africa, but I think in the markets that have the expertise and the quality of people in place, rogue trading is not a thing of the past because it happens every day, but people are caught quicker. They can't trade outside of their limit. Issue is addressed and dealt with far quicker than it ever has been in the past.
As you said, you are giving speeches and lectures about risk management in financial institutions to the public. And in China, there are many retail investors or retail traders. Do you have any advice on the risk management that you can give to them?
My advice is, I suppose this is born out of my experiences as well. I think people always have to be, quite structured in what they do. You have to trade with stops. I'm sure that most of your clients do, or most of your listeners do. Stop losses are vital in anything that you do, and being structured and disciplined and not moving them, and being as qualified as you can be in the way that you place them. But I still trade myself. My philosophy, which is born out of experiences, is to start each day with a blank sheet of paper. I tend not to carry positions overnight. So every day is a different day. You can reassess the market, reappraise what you're going to do, and you don't have any trades that you're trying to protect. If you can imagine years ago when I was in Singapore, rather I would come into the market, look at the market first thing in the morning and think it's a sell today, but I already was long 5,000 futures. And the market couldn't withstand me selling the 5,000 futures and then another 5,000 futures. So I was always trying to protect the position. So I would be buying some more, even though the sentiment or my belief was that the market was going to head a bit lower. So I think when you start a day with an existing position, it clouds your judgment. So what I adopt is what I call the blank page philosophy, so that I start each day with a blank page. I don't like to carry positions overnight, and I want to make my decision for the trading day today based on what's in front of me right now, not a position that I'm trying to protect.
Everyone knows that Nick Leeson was a big trader, and your story was made into movies, and the market is full of temptation, and young traders can get overconfident or intimidated sometimes. Can you give them some advice?
I think there's a few things, but if you have a trading community where you can talk about things, I think that's always a development. I think at the moment, what I will have seen over the last 15 to 20 years is that lots of people, not just young people, are lured into trading the markets because there's a lot of marketing that suggests it's easy, that you can make quick profits. So I always suggest that people look for some education. There are lots of platforms out there that do offer education about how to trade the market. It's important that you empower yourself with information and knowledge, that you do educate yourself. But the psychology of trading is tough. You have to be able to take a loss. Number one, I don't think it comes naturally to anybody, because like me, if I take a trade, I expect to win. Otherwise, I wouldn't take the trade. And once you start getting into a loss-making situation, that becomes psychologically more challenging. People then start to chase. They might double down. They might move their stops. And all of those are, a lack of discipline. So it's important that they're disciplined, that they're structured, that they have some form of education, trading education. And there's plenty of good places that you can get that online. Don't believe everything that you see on YouTube, because there's lots of people out there who tell you that they win every trade. I don't know anybody who does. I never have, and I know. Unfortunately, I think if you don't have experience and or some form of direct education about the financial markets, it's a very dangerous place to be. And people lose a lot of money very quickly.
The Chinese market is booming. Would you like to work in China with your regulation experience?
It's one of the few places that I haven't been, and maybe there's a way we can do some sort of trading event around it where we do a bit of a Q&A or something. But I have no desire to work in regulation. I have no desire to break regulation anymore.
Thanks a lot, Nick, and I think we got everything here.